We are.
We are live.
We are live.
All right. Well, welcome to the show. This is the first live broadcast of the podcast we've done in a very long time, and we are very happy and honored and
happy.
I am happy
and
thrilled to be part of the 2018 Mental Health Bloggers Conference. Everyone that is attending the conference, of course, is in London, while we are in Lakeland, Florida.
We're in the United States.
Yes.
Southern United States, the peninsula of Florida.
That's right.
Enjoying a mild winter. Sorry to say.
It has been pretty mild so far. But we are really excited to have the opportunity to present today and talk about the emerging role of blogs and technology in the mental health field. We're going to cover quite a range of topics, I think.
We're going to go a little bit beyond blogs, if that's okay. With your indulgence, we'd like to talk a little more broadly about the use of online media in the fields of mental health. Okay? A larger topic than we had anticipated.
That's right. Now, we are in a bit of a delay from you guys that are attending the conference, and so I just got a message that they want us to hold on for a second. So
we can do that.
We're going to hold on for a second and see when Fraser asks us to get started back. Okay, now we're good to go again.
We're good. Should we start at the beginning?
We can start at the beginning again. Do you want to start at the beginning?
So we should begin by saying we're in the U.S.
Yes, we are in the United States, and we are very excited to be part of the conference. And we have our title slide up now. The emerging role of blogs and technology in the mental health field. We're gonna talk about a variety of topics, including blogs, but also we're going to talk a little bit about other technologies that are useful in the mental health field in general.
Yeah, we had fully intended to confine ourselves to blogs, since that's the topic here. But as we dove into this project, we thought, well, it might be as informative to talk about the other kinds of online applications and blogs and newsletters that are available, so that listeners and viewers get a better sense of all that is available online.
Absolutely. So, so for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with us, I'm Dr. Bernie Wilkinson.
I'm Dr. Richard Marshall.
And we are psychologists here in Florida, in the United States. And we see a wide variety of patients, including young children, adolescents, adults, couples. We do group work. We do all kinds of things here. But one of the things that we really are enthusiastic about is our dissemination of information. And that's why we do the podcast. And we have been honored to join PsychReg and working with the blog, but also with the podcast and the journal. And so again, it's great to be part of this conference and have the opportunity to talk about this. Because technology it's here to stay, and you know, whether it's blogs or it's applications or anything else,
it's here to stay. Even I'm beginning to accept it. You know, I'm one of the holdouts,
and that's a big statement.
Well, for me, I'm not a Luddite, actually, but. There's that smile. No, I'm not a Luddite, but I am one of the late adopters. Okay, and I had a hard time with this because for me, at my age, this isn't a first language. You're kind of on a cusp. Okay, it's almost a first language. You know, not as much as it is for young teenagers or the I generation. But yeah, I was slow to come to this, but you realize eventually that you have to adopt these technologies.
Absolutely.
One of the things we do here is we will see, for example, students who are in high school and they graduate from high school and they go off to college and they want to maintain a therapeutic relationship. The only way you can do that is to do it online.
Absolutely.
But you want to do it well, and you want to do it ethically, and you want to do it legally. And that's been the challenge, is how to do it well.
Right.
And you're right, dissemination is the other thing for us is we come from academic backgrounds,
Right.
mainly universities and teaching hospitals. And a large part of what we do is dissemination.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always built ourselves as translational
Right.
researchers. We translate technical information into language that parents and teachers can use. Right?
Absolutely.
And again, having an online platform is a wonderful way to do that.
Right.
So
now, the importance, I think, of this conference and of talking about these topics in general is because of the vast amount of information that's out there. You did a search this morning on mental health blogs, and
you go
a surprising finding.
And that really is a key issue, is the enormous amount of information that you're going to encounter.
Right.
When you Google mental health blogs, you get 189 million with an M, 189 million hits, places
Right.
to go, locations, and it's just an overwhelming amount of information. And as we walk through this, the rest of this presentation, we'll talk about how to manage the sheer volume of information that you're going to encounter.
Right. So we'll start with blogs. All right.
Okay.
So a blog is, I think
We've been laughing about this for a week.
when we first started researching and preparing for the talk, as is often Richard's first question, the question was, what does blog mean? What is the origin of the word blog? And so we looked up, and of course, blog comes from, is an abbreviation of weblog.
Weblog.
And Richard, surprisingly, in my opinion, made a connection immediately to Star Trek.
Surprising?
It was surprising to me.
Why?
Because Captain's Log.
Yeah, remember Captain Kirk?
Yeah.
You say Captain's Log.
I remember that.
Stardate 2159 or whatever. Yeah, it was a logbook.
Yeah.
Sailing ships, ships today have logs. They no doubt do it electronically,
Right.
but ships' logs were the captain's way of keeping track of the journey and how quickly they got there and how many days passed in their food and the status of the crew. And so a logbook was the daily update regarding the journey.
Right.
And in fact, a blog is a daily update.
Right.
And one of the reasons we're going to talk about the difference between a blog and other types of sites, but a blog is a daily update that can be revised and is revised on a regular basis.
Right. Right. Now, they're oftentimes very informally written and very conversational. They really encourage readers and viewers of the blog to participate or to engage, to comment and to ask questions and to provide their feedback or their experiences. And so it becomes a bit of a forum at times. Again, depending on the blog specifically, it can become somewhat of a forum for discussions and people to share their experiences and things like that.
Right. And the other word here is engagement. What a blog seeks to do is to engage the reader.
Right.
So the reader not only reads but can respond.
Right.
I think one of the great advantages of a blog, one of the great differences is that prior to blogs, you read something, but you couldn't, prior to the internet, I'm sorry, you could read something and not respond. Now you can respond, you can react. And we all read those comments at the end of particularly news stories and other things that people start to grind their axes. But a blog is meant to have this interchange.
Right.
It makes me think of Wikipedia, which we talked about in a recent podcast, where people can add to Wikipedia.
Right.
Okay, it's not always scientifically accurate or factually accurate, but there is some check. You know, people do add and take away. But the point here is it's reader engagement, where you can read and respond.
Absolutely.
And that's the big advantage of a blog. That's
the advantage, but it's also why it's so important that we're talking about it. As mental health professionals, one of the things that we often work to be mindful of is the fact that, you know, sometimes patients will come in, or people that we're working with will come in, and they will have gone to Dr. Google, and they will find different blogs or different websites, and depending on the source of information, they're going to potentially follow a path or think about things, or sort of believe that they have a particular condition or that something specific is happening to them that may or may not be based upon factual scientific information.
One of the places we see this is on apps. Okay,
right.
And we're gonna talk about them in more detail. But when we said earlier that the challenge with blogs or apps or websites is the sheer volume, the number of sites that you're going to encounter, that you're going to find, and not all of them have been tested. I mean, we mentioned Wikipedia a few minutes ago. The problem with this technology is it can't all be vetted. There just is too much of it.
Right.
And people are free now. There's a discussion in our country about net neutrality. And should everybody have equal access to the internet?
Right.
And there's a raging argument now going on in Congress about net neutrality. The advantage is everybody has a voice.
Right.
The disadvantage is that not all those voices are accurate.
Correct.
And so the challenge is going to be, which ones can I trust to be careful about the content, and which ones should I avoid?
Right. And this takes us to a really important point, and that is the difference between blogs and articles, scientific articles. And the difference is, in large part, the source. While scientific articles are typically written by professionals or researchers or people who are experts in that area, blogs can be written by anyone.
Right.
And so we have to be mindful when we're looking at blogs and to know the source and where it's coming from. And if that source or that author has a particular agenda or motive or perspective that could be factual or not factual. So when we look at the difference between blogs and articles, the things with blogs, of course, is that, again, they're written very conversationally, very informal, but maybe most importantly, they're oftentimes opinion-based.
Right.
They're based upon a person's specific experience. It may not be generalizable, meaning that everyone else may not experience the same thing as they do.
Right.
But it's useful because it shares that person's experience. It says, okay, this person experienced that, which may be similar to what somebody else is experiencing, but it may not be.
Right. And when we talk about access, or everybody having access, one of the great advantages of a blog is they're typically written in a more informal style, so that they're easier to read and understand. Scientific papers, clinical analyses are sometimes difficult to interpret. We talk about translational research. And I think the great advantage of bloggers is that many of them will take very complicated concepts and express it, translate it into digestible form for the lay public, because people who are struggling with a mental health issue will go to the internet, and most are not able to read a scientific paper. Right? You're just not going to know. You're not going to understand the vocabulary of the procedures. A blog gives you access to what has traditionally been inaccessible.
Right. And that reminds me of a number of years ago. Richard and I we've worked with ADHD for decades. I mean, for a long time. And I remember there was an article, scientific article that we got a couple years ago, and it was really interesting. It was the genetic one. And we got the article because we were really interested in what they were coming out with, some of the genetics associated with ADHD. I couldn't get through the first paragraph.
Couldn't read the first paragraph. I mean, we're neuropsychologists by training, and I had never been in this swamp before. I thought, I have no idea what
there were letters put together in that first paragraph that I'm sure were words, but they didn't make sense to me.
No, it was someplace I had never been before.
Yeah. So scientific articles are written in a very formal way that is oftentimes contains jargon, contains information that really only people that are within that specific domain are going to really understand.
The advantage, however, is that they are what we call peer reviewed.
Right.
In other words, if we do a study, and Bernie have done some of this research ourselves, we submit those to peers, and they go through it to make sure it's accurate.
Right.
Okay, which is a very safe,
right,
and really good way to do research is you have other people checking the accuracy of your work. The disadvantage, of course, it takes a long time. Okay, but the advantage is that it leads to more accurate work, and we all remember news stories. There've been several news stories recently.
Yeah.
The most recent that affects the UK and the US were the famous autism and immunization studies, where that work had to be retracted because it was shown to be unreliable.
Right.
Professional journals like The Lancet and the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they have an ethical obligation to present accurate work.
Right.
Okay. Bloggers don't.
Right.
They don't have the same ethical obligation that professional journals do.
Right.
And that's the great difference between articles in journals and blogs.
Exactly. And so we have to keep those issues in mind as we're reading from different resources. And it's not to say that people who write blogs are doing so in a deceitful way or necessarily in a manipulative way, though I'm sure that there are some of those out there. What they're writing is true to them, and this may not be true to other people.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's trying to be deceptive here. I mean, I don't think there's any. There are some commercial bloggers who have products to sell. Yeah. But they're not. It's not really deception. They have a product to sell, and if you're reading these or searching for them, you have to be careful about what you read and how much you believe about what you read.
Absolutely.
Okay? So there is some reader obligation here too.
Right. So let's talk a little bit then about how blogs are used in the mental health field. And I think that there are two different ways. One is as a resource, a reference, if you will. So I know that there are times when I will refer my patients, or I will go myself, of course, to different blogs just for the information. We have blog sites like our own PsychReg and GetPsych, and over here in the United States we have Psychology Today, and we have Psych Central, and some of these other large groups that have they sort of bring in blog posts from different authors from around the world. That was actually how we met and began our relationship with PsychReg, is we were asked to provide a blog post for the site. And so when you look at those types of websites, blog providers, you're going to get information that comes from professionals. Right. Typically.
Yeah, there's an organization in our country called the National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI, and they have a site. They have a blog that you can read and follow and add to. That's a reputable site. That's a national organization. The American Psychiatric Association has one, and so if you move into those reputable organizations, but those are that's that second type. It's these are reputable organizations that have, I would say, accurate information. They don't really have a product to sell. NAMI's not going to sell you anything. American Psychiatric Association isn't interested in selling you anything. And you can go to the sites and feel fairly confident that you're going to get information. It's another whole list that are done by individuals. Okay, so you have organizations doing some, you have individuals doing some. With an individual, it's probably accurate, but maybe more opinion-based.
Well, you have even professionals who write individual blogs, and so we have there is a tendency, again, for it to be not peer-reviewed, that for it to be necessarily opinion-based, and there are professionals who have specific opinions that may or may not be. I don't like the word mainstream.
Kind of mainstream.
Oh, you're thinking the same word. But it is the case that happens, and so you can go to a physician's website, see their blog, and they may talk about some intervention or some treatment or something that is not conventional and is not necessarily approved by any of the approving agencies for a treatment, and you may see that there.
Right, or it may be their particular approach to a topic. I rely on a particular psychiatrist that I'm learning more about and using some of those theories. But it is his perspective.
Right.
Okay, it's not inaccurate. It's just his perspective.
Right. Now, one of the last pieces as it relates to the reference side of the use of blogs is what you mentioned a moment ago, and that is the idea of translational research.
Right.
When you go to PsychReg or Get Psyched or any of these other blog sites, what you're going to find is information from professionals, from people with some expertise in these areas, but they're going to take the somewhat complicated information from the research articles, and they're going to provide it in a way that's going to be easily digestible for anyone to read.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the great advantage.
Right.
Of
that's what I like about blogs.
Yeah, the engagement, first of all, the fact that you can react immediately, and that everything is in very readable, digestible form.
Absolutely. Now, the second way that we can use blogs in the mental health field is basically through the role of support.
Right.
And in this way, blogs can almost become somewhat of a support group for people suffering or struggling with particular things.
Right. Right. I think it would be. I think the second thing is when you go into the world, when you go into the internet and start looking for blogs, there are many that are designed as supports. They're specifically designed to provide patient support.
Right.
Okay. It's not for information.
Right.
It's for support.
Right.
I teach a course on group
group dynamics
and group therapy, and it's one of the great ways that after the group has met and completed its work, say it's 10 or 12 sessions, a group blog would be a wonderful way to provide support, because 20 years ago you had to be in physical contact or phone contact. Today you can continue the work of the group by setting up a blog page for that group, and they can continue to stay in touch with each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can do that, and with these kinds of blogs, you have support from a variety of contributors. So you have people from various experiences. They can be professionals, but they can also just be individuals who've struggled with a particular challenge. But you have all of these contributors coming together to provide support and assistance. They oftentimes talk about their personal experiences, so they can say, this is what I tried. And that's one of the things that we really like about groups and group dynamics and things like that, is the shared experience, the opportunity to share some of those things with the group.
Right. I was reading one the other day, and a dad wrote in and said, my daughter didn't do her homework or failed a test or something, and I've taken her phone for a year. Does anybody have any experience with this? And there must have been 30 immediate responses saying, I think it's a little draconian, and you're not going to want to do that. And they gave all the reasons why.
A year's a little
bit, a little bit much. But that's a wonderful use of a blog, because now you have these people who have done that and can say to this guy, to this dad, don't do that, because that's going to backfire.
Right.
Okay. And so he had this immediate response, and good advice, got good advice.
Right. And it can also lead to other challenges, because just as that same example there, you get this phenomenon of people engaging in extreme behaviors, extreme parenting. We see it especially with parenting, but extreme reactions to things, and it somewhat becomes glorified. In just a few minutes, we're going to talk about social media, and especially it is especially the case with videos, where you have people posting videos of people behaving badly, and if we're not careful, those people that behavior can be glorified, or it can be overly emphasized to the point where other people think, oh, that might be a good idea, and so I'm going to try it as well.
That looks like a good idea.
Yeah. So we have to be careful as it relates to that. So blogging is now, having had the opportunity to write our own blog posts for a while and share blogs with other groups and agencies, it is a fabulous approach, resource for people to be able to get information from, again, oftentimes from professionals, but also from where you can write to them, you can ask them specific questions to clarify this or to explain further that,
Right.
and then they can engage in this conversation with a professional that you may not have otherwise had the opportunity to reach.
Right. I like blogging because I was doing those early morning musings, you know, the little blog page. You'd get up and I go through the internet, I look up health sites and mental health sites and physical things, and you run into things like blue light. Remember when that was, people were talking about that. And we didn't know about that several years ago, but you read about it and you say, this is something I would like to disseminate. This is something I would like to get out to a larger audience.
Right.
You can sit down in the morning and in 30 or 40 minutes, you can post a blog and get that out to people.
Right.
You don't have to do an article that takes 6 or 8 months to get published.
Right.
You can do it immediately. You get it out the same hour
right.
that you typed it. So that's the value
Absolutely.
of dissemination.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just good to get that information out there. So now we're going to switch and we're going to talk a little bit about apps.
Yes.
Applications.
We have to talk about apps.
Yes.
That was another thing I had to ask. What in the world is an app? And somebody said,
he did really ask that.
I did. That's what are these apps? Qu'est-ce que c'est les apps? What are apps?
That's the second time he's spoken French to me in the last 2 days.
I said, but you have to understand. I asked the same question. So
that's the only French he knows.
No, it's not. What is an app? And I'm still kind of not good. This hurts. This pains you, doesn't it?
No, I'm digging it.
You're smiling. It's a derisive smile, however. An application.
It is.
And an application is?
An application is basically a program. It can be a program, a larger program like Microsoft Word is basically an application. It's a pretty dense, heavy application, but it's an application. Yeah. Or they can be very small and mobile, and you can it can be on your mobile device, and it can work offline or online. Most games, of course, on your phone or mobile device are apps.
365 is online, isn't it? It's a problem for us, isn't it?
What? I don't.
Because you have to load everything. It has to.
Oh, Office 365.
Office 365.
Oh, there's another app called 365 that's a sports app, and I was like, I don't know. How did you know about that?
Oh, you were. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. No, Office 365 is online.
Right.
It's not in the computer anymore, and so everything has to load up. So it takes extra time.
Right.
That's an application.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So so when it comes to apps, there is a bit of a variety that we could talk about. You have apps that are web-based, and you have apps that are self-contained within the computer.
Right.
And so they are they can be of a variety of sizes when you talking about this, the density of the app itself.
Because a mobile app, I don't use them, of course, but I hear all about mobile apps. So that would have to be smaller than a desktop. You can have a desktop on your computer.
Right.
Web-based is on the web and you access it. A mobile app goes to your phone.
Right.
Mobile apps are probably the most popular right now, I would guess.
Well, there's a lot of them.
Because there's so many of them, and it's portable and you can carry it with you. But a mobile app doesn't do as much as a desktop app would do.
Right.
A desktop would be a much larger program.
Absolutely. And when we talk about apps related to mental health specifically, there are a lot of them.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
When I saw that number, I had apps. I didn't realize there were 10,000 apps in existence.
Luckily, the screen that we're showing right now is the slide, because that was my my goodness.
Oh, okay.
So, but yes, there are millions of apps, and I did have to.
You say that with such something sympathy. You look at me with a sympathetic look and say, "Dear, there's so many apps." It's just like
it just makes
God love them.
It just makes me sad sometimes. So there are
millions of
apps.
Truly millions?
Yes. And there's 10,000 or more apps specifically for mental health. But what's really concerning about it is that most of them have never been validated, or none of them are, or very few of them are actually evidence-based.
Pause there.
Yeah.
That one of the take-home messages here is that these apps are not tested.
Right.
Most of them have never been tested.
Right.
It's not that they're not useful.
Right.
It's not that they don't have some value, but you must know that they're not being tested. They're simply, I mean, there are 10,000 of them.
Right.
Okay. And they've come out in the last couple of years.
Right.
There hasn't been time to test all these things.
Absolutely.
And they're not tested anyway. They're brought to market quickly. These are mainly businesses that are doing these apps because it's expensive to build them.
Right.
We've talked about building apps, but it's very expensive and it's very time consuming. And they're brought to market quickly and hopefully monetized quickly. So when you get to apps, like blogs, most of them are not going to be tested.
Right.
Okay? And so be careful.
Right.
If you're talking about mindfulness or getting through the holidays or dealing with family, that's one thing. But when you start to move into more serious mental health issues, such as suicide or sobriety, some of those things, then you have to be a little bit more careful, because if you give somebody the wrong advice, it could have catastrophic consequences.
Yeah, there's a few stats here on this slide. You know, there was someone who looked at 700 different mental health apps, and only 4% of them were considered to give acceptable information.
That's right. And
of 58 apps that are specific to sobriety, none of them were formally evaluated.
That's right. And think about that. This is about sobriety. This
Right.
is important information, and yet none of them had ever been evaluated for accuracy or effectiveness.
Right. And part of that is honestly because validating an app is really difficult to do.
Right.
You know, it's not like you know, you could do peer review like you do articles and things like that, but apps can change, you know, pretty easily. You can go in and change a few lines, a few things here or there, and it's immediately updated. Unlike, you know, scientific journals and articles that take a lot of time. So it is there's an issue there as it relates to maintaining accuracy and ensuring that it's correct. And you mentioned how expensive it is to create an app. It is really expensive. However, there's not a governing body that says to be able to do an app that talks about depression, you have to have some expertise.
We don't have a Food and Drug Administration for apps. Right. I mean, that's what the FDA does.
Right.
Is you bring a medication to market, but it takes years to test that medication. Right. There's no such analogous organization for apps. They just will pop up.
Right. And we know of certain apps that are that are created by professionals who know what they're talking about, like EQ. We had the opportunity to interview Dr. Litvin. I think she's doctor now. She was finishing up her dissertation. But Dr. Litvin, she created a EQ, and we talked to other mental health professionals and experts in the field who have provided or created apps that are very valuable, very good, like, you know, Headspace, and we'll have a list here in just a few moments. But so there are those that are really good, but then there's others that, you know, someone's put together because they, just like they would a blog, they put it together because they wanted to share information, they wanted to, it may be their own motivation or their own, you know, agenda that they created an app for, and it may or may not be good information.
That's right. Yeah. And so when you go in to look at whether it's an app or a blog or a website, there's a little thing called About Us. Okay. And I would always click on that if you're looking around, because that tells you who's behind this particular app or blog. And there's one in the United Kingdom, I believe it's called Healthline, and they have all of their all the business people, but then underneath that they have all their professionals, and it's PhDs and MDs and psychiatrists. So whatever gets put up on their site has been checked by their staff. Okay, and again, they're not selling you anything. Well, they may not be selling you anything. Many of these apps are free.
Right.
Okay. So they're not selling you anything, but check out, go spend a little time and go into About Us and figure out what is their mission and who's on their staff.
Right. And we know that there are, at least here in the United States, and I'm not sure if it's happening in the UK yet or not, but we have research groups that are creating prescription apps.
That's right.
Prescription games, prescription apps for different things. There's a researcher at the University of the Florida State University who's creating an app game for people with ADHD, and they're seeking FDA approval to make it to where this is something that maybe even insurance would reimburse for, and so it's moving in that direction.
Right.
But
that's encouraging, because if you go, here's a man who's at a major university, he is seeking FDA approval. Now you're on pretty solid ground, okay? Yeah. But check that stuff out.
Yeah.
It really is our obligation to make sure. And if you are a professional, it's your obligation that if you're going to recommend a site, that you have done due diligence and you've looked into that site and you know what you're advising somebody to do.
Right. Yeah. So we put up this quote here from an article at the Journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatry, JAMA Psychiatry. I don't know why my brain didn't want to say that. And the quote says, bottom line, apps used to enhance mental health are increasingly popular. However, for many apps, there is no evidence of efficacy, and some may offer advice that is harmful and compromise patient privacy. But some may be helpful. When discussing such apps with patients, the American Psychiatric Association app evaluation model can help guide discussion and inform decision-making.
Now, here's a scary thought. They use the word privacy here. Okay, many of the apps are free. The price you're paying is your medical information. So once again, before you sign up for an app, make sure what terms you're agreeing to, because you might be exchanging. The deal you're making is, I agree to give you my medical information in return for using your app. So privacy is also an issue here. So be careful. That might also happen with, I don't think it'll happen with blogs as much, but be careful with apps.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Know what you're giving up with a free app.
Absolutely. So, and here's a list of some of the most helpful. And look, to be honest, if you go onto Dr. Google and you type in the best mental health apps, you're going to get a lot of lists.
It goes on forever.
It does. It does. But we have used a number of these that are on this list, and so and we like a number of them. So there is, for example, Calm is at the top of the list, and that is a great app for meditation and to reduce stress. The same with Headspace, and a little bit further down the list, Pacifica is one that I recently found that I've really enjoyed. Some of them are more specific to mood or anxiety, like Mood Notes helps note your mood throughout the day. Anxiety Relief Hypnosis is an app that, again, obviously helps reduce anxiety. But I'm interested in looking more into the one called Talkspace. Talkspace is a app for online therapy. So they provide therapeutic services.
It's actually real people.
It's real people.
It's like calling a call center.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not sure how they do it.
Yeah.
But they have 100 or almost 200 therapists online in all time zones, ready to provide advice. There are all kinds of interesting questions that arise, but it's a great idea. I have no idea how they're organizing it or how they keep track of it, but it's a wonderful idea. SuperBetter, it's about halfway, about number 6 or 7 on the list. SuperBetter has been studied at the University of Pennsylvania. So here's an app that, and in fact, a university has undertaken the study of its efficacy. So there are some good things out there, and I think there's an emerging awareness that we have to be careful, that we want to be more careful about these.
Absolutely. So we'll now switch to our third area, and that is the area of social media.
My favorite.
And what I really like, because this kind of ties it together just a little bit, there are types of social media called microblogs. Twitter, for example, is a microblog. So it kind of takes us back to the topic of blogs from the beginning. You like how we did that? Don't laugh, Richard. So social media is...
My friends in the UK are laughing about Twitter and me. So
we will talk about that in just a moment. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But social media includes a lot of different things. And in fact, in some ways, blogs can be considered types of social media because of the way in which you can interact and engage.
True.
So social media include any type of forum or app or website or resource that a person can access to communicate with other people, to stay in contact with other people, to share information, share pictures, share videos. But it's often done in pretty close to real time.
And a blog really is a type of social media.
Right.
I mean, but if you look up social media and mental health, you know what you're going to find.
Right.
How bad social media is for mental health.
Right.
It's hard to dig through that literature. But you're right. A blog is social media. It's putting people in touch with each other,
right.
Especially people who might not otherwise find each other. Now you have a way to do that. People
Right.
of similar interests can use blogs to connect with each other.
Absolutely. So there's different types of social media. The most common we have here on our side there, so networking like Facebook. Facebook is a little bit less formal. LinkedIn is somewhat more professional. Microblogging, as mentioned, Twitter and Tumblr.
I know about Tumblr.
Okay.
I have college students.
Oh my gosh. Photo sharing, like Instagram, Pinterest, and Snapchat, things like that.
Little slippery slopes there.
It can be slippery.
That's right.
Especially Snapchat.
Well, no, never mind. I had a patient recently, 12 years old, said, no, nobody can see this. It says it's private. It says only I can see it. And I thought, we have to do this every generation.
Every generation.
It's not private.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in blogs, you don't have a lot of pictures.
Right. You don't have to, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then the third, of course, the last one there is, of course, video sharing. So you have YouTube, Facebook Live, and of course, what we're doing right now in this for this podcast,
which
and that is Google Hangouts.
Google Hangouts.
So, of course, through YouTube, but that's okay.
Right.
So, when it comes to social media, the things that we have to be cognizant of course, is the fact that, as you just said, many times people will think that it's more private than it is.
Right.
And so people will
say things
and do things and post things that break privacy, that you really have to be careful of who you have to, whatever you do with social media, you have to assume that the world is going to see it.
That's the safest way to do it.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be in the newspaper, the front page of the newspaper tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't post it. Question.
Okay.
Snapchat.
Yeah.
Do they really disappear?
It depends.
I can't believe that they disappear. I believe that they might disappear from your phone or the other person's phone, but I'll bet there's a server somewhere.
There may be. I don't know. I've heard that there are people who went to Snapchat and were able to get some records from the past, but I don't know how far back it goes. I don't know in what kind of detail. I don't know if it.
I can remember when Snapchat first came out, it freaked parents completely out. They were absolutely terrified of Snapchat. Now they use it.
Yeah. So social media is a pervasive source of information and contact. But the reason that we're mentioning it is because, as we said, Twitter is a type of microblogging. These are ways, social media includes ways for us to access and to resource mental health services and mental health needs.
Right. And share information, share ideas, share approaches, share treatments, share professionals, say, hey, look, we went to a guy in Rochester, New York, and he was great. Or we found somebody in San Francisco who does this.
Absolutely.
And we were very pleased. So how else would you get that kind of information?
Right. Well, you have professionals, things like Twitter. Of course, you have professionals who are on, who have their own Twitter page, Twitter feeds, and they provide valuable information about various resources and supports for people. But what I one of the main ways that I think about it is just for, again, the general population. I had a patient, a teenage girl, who had some issues with eating disorder. And she had an Instagram feed that was all about supporting people who were struggling with eating disorders.
Support, not, okay.
Yeah, she would post memes and
we'll go over those later today.
Memes or
I hear my children talk about memes. Is it in the Urban Dictionary?
Probably.
Yeah, me completely escapes me. I've asked you about memes and you've defined them. It's a little bit fuzzy.
He worries me. But she posts memes or pictures or just sort of motivational images for people who are struggling with eating disorder. So it can be very helpful. But again, we get into the same issue as blogs.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because the other thing they can be is instructions on how to become anorexic or bulimic. That's the downside of this thing, is that there are support sites for eating disorders. This is how you do an eating disorder. And so I'm glad to know that she did the reverse. So again, the upside and the downside of these sites.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have to think about the pros and cons as it relates to social media, because certainly there are, as you said, there are lots of resources and research articles that suggest that social media is not very good for us. So when we think about the cons, we have the idea that there was some research that suggests that the more time a person spends on social media, the more that they report, the more likely they are to report feeling lonely,
depression,
and they experience depression and anxiety. We start decreasing social skills. We start losing that ability to interact with people face to face. And maybe most importantly, as it relates to adults, is the idea of losing productivity. There have been lots of research out there to suggest that people are spending way too much time on social media during the work hours, and so they're losing productivity in work, and that's causing those kinds of issues there. So, but there are pros as well.
There are. It's even I, as I confess to being a late adopter. Don't know what a meme is yet. I kind of know what a meme is, but I don't use them, and so. But even I, as a late adopter, find them to be exceedingly useful, both as a contributor and as a consumer. Each of these things that we've talked about plays a valuable role, can play a valuable role in exchanging information. And I think that's the great part about it, is the exchange of information.
Absolutely, and it's great, but it takes a toll. We joked that we were going to mention your involvement with Twitter just a few minutes ago, and
do we have time to mention?
It's just going to be real quick.
What, you're going to do it?
But yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
I'll share from my perspective. One of the things that you said after you got your Twitter account
in the summer of this year. I didn't sign up. August. I was signed up for Twitter at the beginning of August. My friends here in the UK decided that it was time for me to have a Twitter account. I was sitting at a table where everybody was tweeting, and I was suddenly realized that I was left out. And I thought, that's how kids feel. They get left out. And so I signed up for Twitter. And what did I discover immediately?
This is hard.
It was time.
It's so time consuming.
I got bombarded. I typically have 21 Twitter things. Tweets. Unanswered tweets. And you look at it, and there's a little bird there. It says 21, 25, 30. It takes time to keep up.
It does.
I marvel. I have my phone out on my desk, and I marvel at you guys. You have these running things, our buddies in the UK, and there's all this exchange going on. I don't have time to do that. I'm busy typing a report or making, doing something else. It takes time.
But it allows us to keep track of what Fraser's doing and what our
Fraser is very good at. Fraser, you are. I hope you're listening to this. You're very good at this. I continue to be impressed at the volume that you produce and how you keep up with this one. I don't know.
It's doing great. So, but there are positive ways to use social media, and there are apps and social media programs like OHMD,
sure.
where a patient and a professional, a physician or a psychologist or counselor or therapist or something, they can chat with each other in a HIPAA protected. Here in the United States, we have HIPAA, which protects patient privacy, but it's HIPAA protected, and so they can communicate and chat back and forth. So you have very immediate access to your physician or your treatment provider. But you also there's also sources of support through social media for patients or for people who are struggling with different things, like through forums and some of those kinds of sites, Twitter feeds and Facebook pages that are there to provide information about things. So there are a lot of positives associated with social media. We can't just focus on the negatives.
And we have a professional obligation to, you can't leave your professional hat at the online door.
Right.
I mean, we have as professionals, we have an obligation to find out as much as we can about a site before we recommend it to our patients.
Right.
If we've used it ourselves and we find it reliable, that's good. But we have that professional obligation.
Right.
And if you're a consumer or user, make sure what you're using is reliable and accurate.
Absolutely. So wrapping up, as we're coming close to the end here, before we take a couple of questions, we want to note that when it comes to blogs and applications and social media, all of these can be tremendous supports and sources of resources for people who need information about something that they or someone in their family is going through, for themselves, of course, or for anything that they're anticipating or something coming up. If they need information, these are great ways, because then you're getting it from people. You have the potential, I should say, of getting information from people who have lived through it, have been there, or who are even professionals in that area. It's just, we got to make sure that it's good information.
Right. That's right. That's the obligation.
I really liked what you said about the about us.
Right.
Look at that and make sure that there are at least people who are professionals involved that are offering the information, or at least reviewing the information before it's posted or put out there. Otherwise, we get stuck to this idea of we're not sure if this information is good or not.
Right.
You mentioned the pro-ana sites that are pro-anorexic. That's a problem.
Right.
And Google and some other search engines have put some resources in place to prevent those from coming up in searches.
Right.
But the fact that they are out there means that people are accessing them.
They're using them, right? They're using them. Yeah, it's frightening.
Yeah. And so checking the source, checking the author, looking to see as best you can what the motivation or what the agenda is for the person or the group that is publishing the information, because otherwise we had a guy here, there was a physician here in Florida, probably 10 or 12 years ago, who had a website, and he was selling vitamins that he claimed cured autism. Now, if you went to his website or in his blog and everything, he would look very professional. He would look like, this guy is an expert in this area. Look at all the work that he's done, and he says that these gummy vitamins will cure autism.
And the testimonials are typically newspaper articles or letters from supposed to be patients, and that sort of stuff. So be careful with all that.
Yeah.
You could, be careful.
Yeah.
And it's not really a buyer beware field of inquiry. I think most of the blogs, but I would stick with those that are associated with professional organizations.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the safest way to do it. Stick with those, or with reputable people. I mean, there are people. We mentioned Fraser a few minutes ago.
Right.
He's a reputable professional. He's putting accurate things out there. And we know that because we know him and we know that he's a professional.
Right.
So, but stay close to home.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. And many times those professional resources will have their own app or their own blog or their own website.
But you can trust them.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So we had a, we're going to open it up now for some questions. And I know that I'm trying to stay in contact with Fraser and everyone over there and Den over there in the UK to be able to respond to questions. And one of the questions that we've already been offered is, how can we work to vet or to verify or to ensure that an app or a blog or something is providing valid information. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that I would certainly encourage is through my work as a professional that I honestly try to make recommendations for blogs and applications and things like that for people, is I get them myself. Right. And so if a person is wondering about a particular app, hey, is this a good app for meditation or for stress management or for dealing with depression or whatever, I go on and I try to find it, and I will try it out myself and see if the information is good information. So if you're wondering if an app is good, try to find a professional who you can talk to, who will tell you and try it out themselves.
Yeah, and one of the ways you can do that, and we do it all the time with patient care, is that if you're not sure about something, your ethical obligation is to check with other professionals. And so one of the things that I would do, because I am less experienced in this realm, is I would go to other professionals. I have the advantage of working with Bernie, who does keep up, and I can say, hey, do you know of a good app for depression?
Right.
Okay. And I can go to other professionals, other people I know, and I can say, hey, I have a patient who'd like to do this. Can you recommend anything?
Right.
So that's something that we already do with patient care. Right. We say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Am I on safe ground here?
Absolutely.
And so you apply that same ethical standard to before you recommend apps or blogs.
Absolutely. And I guess the last point would be, before you make any decisions or changes or anything like that based upon what you read on a blog or see in an app or on social media or anything like that, make sure you thoroughly read it, and you do check with other people, or you kind of search the internet for other supports for that. Right. We were talking about Google, Dr. Google a little while ago, but Google Scholar can be your best friend.
That's right.
Google Scholar, because that gets into scientific journals and things like that. And so if someone's recommending a particular vitamin or a particular thing to manage something, and it just doesn't sound right to you, go to Google Scholar and type in those keywords and see if there's any scientific journals that support that.
Right. That's right. And use About Us. Find out about the organization.
Right. Yeah. Go to the source.
Right.
So,
okay.
All right. Those were the main questions that we've gotten so far. I'm going to turn it over to Fraser there. If there's any other questions or anything else they would like from us, while we're doing that, I'm going to put up our contact slide so that you can have our information on how to contact us if you want to. We just had a question that was posted to us, so let me switch over to our other slide. All right, so the question was, when you write a blog for an audience, how do you communicate that something is not necessarily research-based, but based on your own experience? I think that there's a couple things to think about.
Two things.
First is, I think, saying that right out, just saying, this is from my experience, according to my experience, dealing with this or working with this, this is what I did, or this is what I went through. So I think that coming out right off from the beginning to say that would be important.
Yeah, I think the distinction is, what I try to do when I do a blog is, if I'm going to say something, I go into the literature and I find out, is there anything about this that I might be able to, and you don't have to explain it. You just have to say, there's a study done, here's the link.
Right.
Okay. That's one way to do it. If you can't find anything, you can say, there is no literature on this topic, but in my experience, my personal experience is, or the experience of my patients is this.
Right.
And so you just admit it. But I think we have the obligation as professionals to at least find out if there is any literature on a particular topic.
Right. And if you're a blogger who isn't necessarily a mental health professional, but you're just writing, again, from your own experience, I think, as you said, I think it may be important in your About Us page or something like that to put in there, maybe even on the homepage of your blog, put on there that the information provided here is based upon my experiences, and unless otherwise noted, these are my opinions and may not be consistent with what a mental health professional or somebody, an expert in this area may suggest.
Yep. Or always safe, check with your personal physician or your psychologist or your therapist.
Okay. All right. So that's we say. Any other questions? All right. We were asked another question, and this time we were asked that we mentioned Google Scholar, and we were asked if there are other good sources of information to validate information. I think that there are a couple of other sources. Again, Google Scholar is probably the easiest, probably the most universally available to everyone. But there are others here in the United States. For example, we have the American Psychological Association, who has a website with a tremendous amount of information. The British Psychological Society has a website with a lot of different information that you can go to.
Right.
We did a podcast not long ago on something that we don't typically talk about. We talked about hyperhidrosis, right? And so when we wanted to get some information about it, and we had originally kind of come across a blog post about a person experiencing some stress and anxiety associated with excessive sweating. We just kind of went into Google and did some searches, and we found the International Hyperhidrosis Society, and we started reading from there. So, when you go to, when you're looking up a particular topic or you're concerned about a particular issue or problem, I think it's important to go to the organization or the society that is specific to that topic.
Right. Look for an organization specific to that topic. If you can't find one, and you just go into the internet, go to sites that end in .org, .edu, and .gov.
Right.
Because then your government, organization, or education.
Right.
They're typically not trying to sell you anything. .com.
Typically.
We have a .com site.
Right.
We're not really trying to sell anybody anything.
Right.
Ours is .com. I think it's accurate and reliable. But if you want to be sure, go to any website that ends in edu, gov, or org.
Right. We also have the here in the well, it would be available anywhere. It is things like WebMD tends to provide really good information. Medline or Medscape tends to provide really good information. Here, the U.S.-based National, I'm thinking of
National
Institute of Mental Health, and the National. Those are all really good organizations to kind of search.
NIH, NIMH.
NIH is the one I was looking for.
Right, National Institute of Health.
National Institutes of Health, and they have a lot of subcategories like the NIM, National Institute of Mental Health.
NIH.
Yeah, I don't know.
But there are some others. There's one called Shrink Rap, Shrink space RAP, and it's actually 3 psychiatrists. So that's probably going to give you good information. There's another called Dr. Psychobabble, again, a psychiatrist. I mean, these are reputable people. So there are some. There's the American Counseling Association, has a good website and an active page that they keep up with every day. American Psychiatric Association. Tell you another good one that I always rely on is the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. It's a very user-friendly, and they give you access to it. You don't have to be a member to gain access to a lot of their materials. So again, what we're saying is start with the organizations.
Right.
Okay, that's your safest bet.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. So any other questions? All right. So I think that is it. They're taking a break for lunch now. So we appreciate the opportunity to present and be part of this conference. And there's our contact information is up. If anybody has any questions or would like to be in contact with us or follow what we're doing, all of that information is there. And we are happy to communicate. So, all right.
They're going to have lunch?
Yep.
We're going to have breakfast.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.